Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Tom Nightingale, who's President and CEO at International Package Shipping, and Martin Verimaran, who is CEO at MP Objects. And today we're going to talk about digital supply chain control towers, from concept to practice. Now, one of my predictions for 2018 was that supply chain visibility was going to get clearer, more real-time, and more predictive with machine learning and enhanced data. And one of the big trends that's part of that story is the continued evolution of digital supply chain control towers. So what's new and different with this technology? What are some of the factors that are driving demand for it? And how are companies deriving value and business benefits from digital supply chain control towers? Well, those are some of the questions we're going to explore in today's episode, and certainly great to have Tom and Martin on the program to share their insights and advice on this topic. So, Tom, Martin, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Adrian. Looking forward to some good discussions on the digital control tower today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Tom, let me start with you. Again, the term control tower has been around, for some time, and certainly it's continued. The technology and what that means has continued to evolve over the past few years. I mean, what is digital supply chain control towers, and what's different today compared to just a few years ago?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Adrian. As you said, the term has been around forever, but I think it's been one of the most kind of abused terms in our industry. I think that it means something different to so many different people, and the concept has always been right. Since the day it originated, the concept has been right. It's been an intuitive concept. But in those early days, what we really saw was supply chain control towers that were just basically a bunch of people being thrown into a room in the hinterlands or in some low-cost operating environment where you could provide some updates, the occasional change in routing, or a slight response to something that went bump in the night. And I think what's really changing now is that the consumer's expectations have come up so high versus where they used to be. Call it the Amazon effect, call it anything you want. But, a consumer today, or even an average run-of-the-mill procurement person, not necessarily, the procurement team that might have been at the largest, the Fortune 50 companies in the past, have so much information at their fingertips and such high expectations now that those intuitive but largely unfulfilled promises of control towers have now really become just absolutely the bane of everyone's existence. Everybody wants and needs and expects companies to be responsive and to be able to orchestrate a supply chain in a way that not only gives them visibility, but gives them the ability to respond in real time, change the routing of a shipment, change the destination of a shipment, and to be able to knit together system so that the consumer experience is seamless, flawless.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great, that's a great point, and I agree. I mean, I think what I hear from a lot of companies is that the margin for error has gotten smaller and smaller, right? So, the ability to make smarter decisions faster is even more critical. And I think, right now companies could get away with some of those black holes that they had across the supply chains, whether it was black holes on the international front, where there was black holes in terms of what was happening, at the storefront level, or what was happening with the final mile delivery, or what was happening with returns, whatever the case might be, they can get away with it. But now really, because the consumer expectations and not only in the B2C world, but even the B2B world, the expectations have become so great. And the competitive landscape has become much more significant. That need for being able to understand what's happening in real time across the supply chain, and then being able to take action and intelligent action, in a quick manner, I think has become much more important. So Martin, that leads me to you, and my next question. I think Tom touched upon it a little bit there, but I mean, what is driving demand for digital supply chain control towers now? I mean, I'm sure he brought up the Amazon effect, but I'm sure that's only part of it, right?
Yeah, so basically at MPO, we see like four main drivers basically making this all happen. The first one is like what we call the customer is king. Yeah, it's the Amazon effect in the B2C and the B2B world these days, like an endless choice, lowest cost, highest service, personal experience, the impossible combination of all the good things, getting there towards the customers. At the same time, we also, as a second driver, see like globalization. Competition is getting global. Yeah. On the one hand, that's an opportunity to enter into new markets. At the same time, it's a threat. So it creates like an open market where definitely you need to create an edge. Also, when it comes to your supply chain performance, or as we call this, like the base in marketing, supply chain performance should be really like a differentiator to win in those new open global markets. At the same time, because of those globalization effects and other specialization, basically, so get younger or get involved. It's because of the globalization and the geographically expansion over the globe. But at the same time, there's also like more specialization. Companies tend to make better use of more specialized suppliers, for example, to support their wider assortment, but also to make use of specialized contractors. Even within their own companies, they might have an internal network because they have been subject to, let's say, merger and acquisition. So specialization and netting are also other drivers which we see adding to the overall complexity of the supply chains these days. And at the same time, and I also would like to mention that as a driver, technology is there. The cloud is disrupting the business. And we have the best examples available from the consumer world still these days, like Spotify, Airbnb, Uber. But also in the B2B, we have seen, the power of, for example, Salesforce. We might talk about, Uber Freight and so on. And these trends, so these disruptive cloud technologies are also entering into the world of supply chain management these days as a fourth driver of why the digital control tower and digital supply chain now really, are happening.
That last point I think is right on. I mean, I think just to build on what both Tom said, right? Tom, you kind of talked about how this concept has been around for some time, and there was a lot of promise early on or expectations early on, but quite frankly, some of the technology just wasn't ready for it. A decade ago, when whether it was cloud technology, which is kind of from a computing standpoint, being able to process data and information in a much more timely, manner. Volumes of data that in the past would have taken hours, if not days, to process all that information. And then when you have things like mobile right now and sensors, and you've got APIs and web services that are facilitating the connectivity and the flow of information. I mean, I think that's all of that coming together is really helping to facilitate all of this.
Absolutely.
So Tom, when you consider that companies have, already invested in ERP and, transportation management systems and warehouse management systems and, other supply chain, systems, I mean, why is a control tower, even needed? I mean, in other words, where does and how does a digital control tower fit within the existing IT landscape that companies have already?
Yeah. So I think what we've seen is that, generally speaking, ERPs, TMSs, WMSs, they have all pretty much achieved the potential that we all thought they would individually. The problem is, by definition, they are siloed systems. They really have never done a good job talking back and forth across systems, whether sometimes it's the same company that manufactures that software, sometimes it's different companies, but companies have made investments in this legacy technology, and it's good technology. There's nothing wrong with it. But what they need to extend the life of that technology out, and they need to get that technology working across its silos. And the digital supply chain control tower promise, and what is now finally becoming reality, we can knit together those disparate technologies and do it in a way that's seamless for the consumer, do it in a way that's seamless for the individual operator who has to make a decision, who has to actually orchestrate a supply chain. And in the past, would have had to jump around from screen to screen and from system to system, or maybe, call into somebody else who had access to a different system. Now, this can all be done through a single control tower application. And as Martin mentioned before, the fact that the cloud has become ubiquitous, the fact that we can knit all these things together with a much lighter footprint than we ever would have in the past, I think represents an entirely new generation of technology, and extending the life of those products out and making them far more useful, taking them from here where you had them before up to here where you can really get the full realization of the value that you thought you would.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Martin, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I can add to that. Definitely, I subscribe to the view like ERP systems, warehouse systems, and transportation systems. They all deserve their need, add value in their respective areas. But as such, it's not enough. There's something extra needed to basically represent the end-to-end demand and to act on behalf of the customer, basically to create that incredible experience like the Amazon over multiple parties.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other important piece is, the fact that, supply chain by nature is going to be a heterogeneous IT environment, right? So even though, you may even have, put efforts in to get as homogenous as possible within your own four walls, the reality is that you still need information from logistics service providers, from carriers, from your suppliers, from your customers, and they all have, different systems, and perhaps in some cases, no systems at all. Right. So part of the challenge is, how do you connect effectively and seamlessly, with what is by default and it will always be a very heterogeneous and changing environment, because your suppliers today may not be your suppliers tomorrow. Your customers today may not be your customers tomorrow. So it's an ever changing, landscape there. That's part of the challenge. Martin, kind of diving into the technology a little bit then, I mean, what are some of the key capabilities companies should look for in a digital supply chain control tower then?
Yeah, so right. So in order, to become like a mature player in the digital supply chain world, you definitely sooner or later need to have your own control tower platform. And by this, I mean, coming back to your point, first of all, you need to create end-to-end visibility over all the operations, over all the service providers, over all your suppliers, customers, internal facilities, and so on. So visibility mainly at that level is still focusing on getting the data together, transparency. But that's not enough. From that level onwards, basically, you also need to make sure that the control tower platform is enabling you to collaborate, basically, to enable, facilitate a process across the parties. Those can be, internal people, but also your external parties, like your suppliers and your service providers working in the supply chain, but also like, customs parties, regulators, collaborating on the same pieces of information. On top of that, and then you're, let's say, approaching like the ultimate levels, you also should have a control tower platform which supports optimization, which facilitates decision making. The challenges are so complex, it's let's say beyond human comprehension. You need to have algorithms and rules, decision rules basically in the system to the extent possible, at least automate those decision processes, or wherever you would like to at least get, suggestions which you can basically then decide upon. And basically, if you add the levels of visibility, collaboration, and optimization, in our view, you have a true control tower platform which really is like supporting you in the orchestration. We call it like supply chain orchestration. It's having planning and execution basically integrated into one system, going hand in hand and working on a continuous basis. That's the true, let's say, ultimate level of control tower platform to deliver that ultimate customer experience. In the MPO terminology, we call it like every customer order deserves its own micro supply chain. And this can be like a consumer order that you place, which requires, the best of the best of the internal activities in your own company, but also the external activities being done by others to just satisfy the needs. You would like to have it there at that place with special conditions, special packing, gift wrapping, whatever, you make it up. And the same holds for the purchase departments where, Tom, you talked about. Those purchasers place purchase orders. And they also would like to have that personalized experience in the purchase order. They have all kinds of special wishes, which also require that, let's say, the suppliers come up with their micro supply chains to satisfy the needs of purchase orders in the B2B world. Managing these micro supply chains, it's not easy because it requires, obviously, let's say, end-to-end order management. And at the same time, the order management needs to take into account, let's say, inventory visibility. So where are products available, which can be sold? Not just now, but also, having a view on future inventory levels across multiple locations. The primary stock records might be in multiple systems, but still you need to have an integrated view to make the optimal sourcing decisions. On top of that, you also need to take into account, transport considerations, like what services are available, what lead times does it take to do with, hazardous goods, international customs regulation, and so on. So all these, factors need to be taken into account in the control tower platform. And then I'm talking the transactional side of the business. Obviously, besides the transactional side, you also would like to have, clear financial overviews. So pricing and costing should be there at the detailed level to do, let's say, cost allocations, supply chain cost allocations, but also to use those cost levels to make conscious decisions on what is actually optimal. And on the non-transactional level, obviously, it's all about analytics, descriptive analytics to get a view on, the aggregate level, but also to learn from the analytics and to make it more like prescriptive, or maybe later on even like predictive. So the control tower platform, in its ultimate form, let's say, requires a lot of strength to be combined into one, preferably cloud platform.
As you were talking there, you were kind of describing, that whole overview. Kind of, it struck me, going back to the early part of our conversation in terms of how much, this type of platform has evolved over the past decade. I think if you look back to the early days of Control Tower, it was really just about visibility, right? It was about just being able to see what's going on. And not only has the visibility dimension of Control Tower continued to expand to be, much more end-to-end than it was in the past. Now you really recognize that the importance of visibility is just not enough, right? You also need to have that optimization, right? Because the amount of data, the amount of complexity that's involved, you just can't, be able to take, make smart decisions without kind of some optimization to really make sense of what's happening. And then, of course, you've got the further innovations that are taking place with, artificial intelligence and machine learning, kind of pushing the envelope on that end as well.
Yeah, so maybe to add to that, Gartner, as a respected analyst agent, is also working on this. And in the past, they call this like supply chain visibility. And obviously, I don't like visibility to cover basically all the areas I just explained. It's just the basic level. And these days, there's also acknowledgement for that. So basically, we at MPO call it like supply chain orchestration, like a conductor, planning and execution going hand in hand. And Gartner is working also on a Magic Quadrant on what they call the multi-enterprise business networks, because that's truly what it is. Multi-enterprise business networks where you manage orders and transactions from an end-to-end perspective, taking into account the multiple considerations and helps with the execution system, the ERP, warehouse, and transport systems.
Great. Yeah, no. So I've talked about supply chain operating networks and kind of in a similar kind of framework in terms of bringing in the connectivity around all the trading partners that are involved, and then obviously layer on top of that not only the visibility to your point, but all the the ability to optimize and transact a variety of different supply chain processes. Tom, back to you. And looking at it now from the perspective of logistics service providers. I know when I talk to a lot of logistics service providers, Control Tower is something that's top of mind for many of them. I mean, how are digital supply chain control towers impacting and transforming the 3PL, the logistics service provider industry? I mean, is this a must for them? Is this a growth opportunity for them?
So I think there's kind of two parts to that question. What does it do to the day-to-day of their operations is really the first part. And then what does it do to the future operations? So I'll try to address both. I think in terms of the day-to-day of the operation, it makes them more digital and therefore less human capital intensive. It lightens up the staffing burdens. It is hard to get good quality teammates to staff a third-party logistics company and bring them up that learning curve. And where you can put technology in that place, it's a powerful tool. I think secondly, the ability to implement quickly with a cloud-based and lightweight application that doesn't require that 2-year implementation of, say, the traditional ERPs that we've seen so often is powerful, and it also keeps their costs in line because we're all under cost pressures as LSPs. I think third, it's giving them a higher level of ability to optimize supply chains. So it's not just about that visibility. It really is, as you have both just said, about the control, or as Martin would say, the orchestration of the supply chain. Visibility is table stakes these days. Everybody can do it. Now it's about optimizing, controlling, and orchestrating those supply chains for your customers' benefits. And I think, as you look at the future for 3PLs and what supply chain control towers can really do for them, is it allows them to, if they are able to acquire the right systems, to integrate across customers, across their customers' trading partner networks, across their customers' supply chain networks, and deliver value for them more quickly in a way that's far more sticky. Because as an LSP, our biggest frustration is always the fact that every 3 years we know we're going to get bid out. And now if you can do this, it's a real differentiator. And if you can't, it's a real negative. And I think the ability to take a platform, whether it's MP Objects or anybody else, I think it's very powerful for a LSP to be able to leverage that as a sales tool and to make their value proposition stronger in the marketplace than just the traditional, hey, we're going to throw a bunch of bodies at it, which is what a lot of people have done. I mean, I've had customers come in and tour operations where I didn't have technologies like this and say, wow, we really like your control tower. And I would look around and I'd say, what control tower? I don't much. But now this is becoming reality, and I think it really allows LSPs to differentiate in a way that they probably have never been able to.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that, I know when I talk to a lot of both the LSPs as well as, shippers and manufacturers, and I've written about this in the past, I talked about how the value proposition of LSPs is almost becoming, kind of flipped. It used to be about, logistic services and with technology as an enabler. And in many cases, what a lot of manufacturers and retailers are looking for is they're looking for that technology as kind of the leading aspect of it. Give us the ability to orchestrate, give us that visibility, give us the tools, almost like becoming an outsourced IT provider in many ways, where the actual physical movement of the goods and all that is kind of expected that you're going to be able to do a quality job of that. And where the differentiator really is going to be is on the ability to orchestrate and provide that visibility, which is really, at the core of the technology here. Martin, kind of jumping off of there now, I mean, LSPs are, one use case, type of company that can benefit from this, obviously manufacturers, retailers. I mean, with looking across the companies that you work with, I mean, can you share with us some, use cases or customer examples of how digital supply chain control towers are, delivering business value?
Yeah, right. So basically, we do serve both, ambitious first to make sure that their winning products also, let's say, flow to market better, and also we work for the top LSPs to make sure that they grow their business, basically, offering more advanced services, complex supply chain services. Just to give you examples, basically, we work on, let's say, the outbound perspective, distribution perspective, a lot in the B2C market for international e-commerce. Where typically, for example, from the US, consumer goods basically get shipped from US to South America, to Asia and so on. So pretty long chains, but still, very controlled, precision execution underlying to it. Another example is more like B2B e-commerce, where we help, let's say, a wholesaler in Europe, for example, to really connect all the countries together and deliver from multiple stock points and warehouses across, let's say, 25 plus European countries. So an integrated, solution over, let's say, multiple executions, multiple warehouses, and making use of multiple carriers to indeed, fulfill the promise and also offer the flexibility on the website for those business customers to pick their choices and also submit a special request. If I look at, the reverse side, we do a lot on the reverse side. In high tech, for example, technology, we help, high-tech industry, computer spare parts to be delivered right on time with very short times, like 1 to 2 hours, from forward stock locations, very close to the, for example, banks or factories which have these critical computers running. We create visibility over, let's say, central stock, local stock, and make concessions where it can best be sourced from, taking into account the SLA with the customer, but also, the stock availability on those various locations, and obviously the lead times and the single or multi-lag execution from the sourcing location, point of consumption or use. Talking reverse, it's also about collecting, for example, faulty pieces, and in a consolidated way send them back to OEMs or repair vendors and get them back again in a very controlled manner, even if those OEMs might be somewhere in Mexico or in India. Yeah? So longer supply chains with precision execution through making use of the digital control tower platform. And finally, other use cases we do support are on the inbound side. Think about vendor managed inventory and just-in-time deliveries in the automotive industry, where components are needed on the assembly line with sequencing, and we basically support those suppliers with managing their stock close to the assembly line, having like MRP type of logic to do call-offs just in time, taking into account also the precise package units, consolidation rule, and transportation lead times towards the factories. And finally, on the as a last example on inbound, basically supplier collaboration. For example, in the oil and gas industry, we help some companies delivering their supplies on quite exotic places, where a control tower system obviously is in place, but also where suppliers have an active role to basically collaborate and work from the purchase orders and add their advanced shipment notifications and make sure that with the control tower team, the optimal flow towards those, let's say, oil rigs, whatever point is needed, is all well organized and executed as such.
Yeah, that's a great set of diverse examples there. Just kind of curious. I mean, one of the things that I've come across when I talk to the companies is that when they're looking at the business case or the justification, obviously cost reduction or cost management is always going to be part of that. But one of the things that's really rising to the surface, and becoming as important, and in some cases even more important than cost reduction, is really kind of the customer satisfaction, the customer experience, and even retaining or capturing market share as becoming a bigger part of the business value, a business driver for that. Are you seeing the same thing, with kind of the business cases that you've come across?
Yeah, actually, I see two answers to that observation. One, basically, we are selling more and more towards the commercial side of the companies. So where in the past, maybe, it might have been like an IT topic or a CIO topic. Thereafter, we're way more in touch with the VP supply chains to think about their efficiency of supply chains. And we also see that commercial teams get involved, business development teams, marketing and sales, because they would like to expand their proposition to the market with a proper supply chain service. So they are, deliberately working on further developing the place in marketing to the next level to create an edge. And we are helping truly, our customers on those various levels, not just the IT level, not just the operational level, but definitely also on the, let's say, competitive edge level. And having said so, that requires obviously also a different view on the value equation. And I can share with you, like in the past, we might have focused on cost savings, which are obviously there. But I see in our sales cycles these days that the cost saving as such is not the most significant decision factor. It's all about, let's say, adding to the top line. It's difficult to quantify, but for some, basically, it's even like a license to operate or a way to thrive, basically, in a highly competitive market, and also a way to expand their market share and penetrate into new markets. So all like top line related value creators.
Great. Well, we're running short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question here. And so, Tom, I'll ask you first, and then Martin, you can provide your thoughts as well. I mean, as a way to wrap up, Tom, I mean, what questions should supply chain executives ask themselves to determine if they need a digital supply chain control tower, and what action should they take to get started?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you're evaluating potential providers, I think you want to look for providers that are platform neutral. They can knit it together your disparate ERP, WMS, TMS type systems. They can be implemented easily. They've got a good track record of success. This field is new and it's emerging, but it's not so new that nobody has good, solid, referenceable customers. Depending on the nature of your supply chain, you probably want somebody who's global in nature and somebody that can implement quickly. as I mentioned before, gone are the days of the 2-year ERP implementation. Thank goodness. So I think, as you're looking at your business, you want to evaluate providers up against that, and you want to base your decision on whether or not you have customer expectations that are rising. I don't know too many people who are asking me to, or who are currently being asked to do less with more. It's usually the other way around. Everybody's being asked to do more with less. Everybody's customers' expectations are rising. And as a result, business has to be done differently than it used to. And those legacy systems have to be extended out and knit together in ways that they've never been able to do before.
Great points. Martin, your thoughts?
Yeah, so right. I think, look in the mirror and ask yourself, like, we survive in 5 to 10 years' time if we do not act upon it. So not, develop our services any further, if we do not, develop the place in marketing any further, will we have, a place in the market going forward? And if the answer is no, then definitely you need to do something. And that requires obviously like an organizational initiative to work on it, but also you need to have sooner or later a platform to support that. And obviously when you look for a platform, you should look at the functionality, technology, but also, as Tom mentioned, organizational experience, business critical, availability and support levels, and ease of implementation and international coverage. And more at a more detailed level, and I think in the end that matters for sustainable competitive edge. Make sure that you choose a platform which is not just there to create visibility or support collaboration, but truly can optimize and support, let's say, orchestration on inbound, outbound, and reverse, with the key principle that each and every customer order deserves its own micro supply chain, which you plan up front, execute accordingly, and if something happens, you take mitigation measures to still, let's say, deliver to the promise. And if you still cannot make it, then at least keep everybody informed and take corrective actions to the maximum extent.
Great. Well, great food for thought and insights and advice. Like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we always just manage to, scratch the surface on this topic. And this is certainly a very meaty topic, but I think we covered a lot of ground today, a lot of great, insights and perspectives and advice on kind of where we are today with digital supply chain control towers, where we're heading in the future, and kind of how to get started. So Tom and Martin, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, and my pleasure. Thank you.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either on the MP Objects website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Tom or Martin, you can post it there, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.